Hello and Assalamualaikum, and also good evening to all the people who came to our talk today, especially the data management student from UiTM Puncak Perdana. So today I want to talk about the topic that quite relate to us, which is open source software versus traditional software. What is the similarities and what's the difference? So, ladies and gentlemen, since we rarely talk about this kind of topic on our daily lives, let's refresh our memories on what is open source software and what is traditional software. For starters, what is exactly open source software? Anybody knows? Okay, nobody wants to answer. So, to answer that, first we need to understand what is the meaning of the term open source. The meaning of open source can refer to something that people can modify and share because it is designed to be publicly accessible, which means open source software can be defined as software with source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and enhance. So, let's talk a bit about source code since we touch a bit about it. So, source code can simply be defined as the code that computer programmers can manipulate and change in a software or program to make it behave into a certain behavior. And since open source allows anyone to modify and edit the software source code, it is highly possible that anyone can create a better version of the software. Here is a few examples of open source software. First, we have OBS, which is an open source broadcasting software. Second, we have Mozilla Firefox, which is one of the largest web browser that the world use, which is also open source. And lastly, we have OpenOffice, an open source office suite software. Now, let's talk a bit about, let's talk a bit. Let's talk about traditional software. So, it is, as we know, that traditional software is also known as closed source software, which means not everybody in the public have access to edit, change, or modify the software source code. This meant that the author or the creator of the software is the only people that have the access to the software, the source code of the software they have created. Some examples for the traditional software includes Microsoft Office, Adobe Creative Suite, Skype, and Microsoft Windows, which most of the software that being mentioned here is the one we use every day. Now, let's think. Since the open source software and traditional software is very different from each other, is there any similarities between them at all? Well, there are some similarities, although it is not too much. For starters, both softwares are usually created by a single computer programmer or a team of program developers. Second, both software sources, both software source code needed to be coded properly before being built into a software. Third, both open source software and traditional software are prone to failing in the future. And lastly, both software usually maintained by somebody, whether it is an individual, a community, or an organization. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where our topic become, a bit more interesting. Because as we know, both software is very different from each other. So, let's explore what is the difference between both software. So, first, as I explained earlier, open source software allows anyone to modify, change, and edit the software source code based on their preference, while traditional software does not allow anyone to have access to the software source code, which means that the software source code is protected from the public view. Second, open source software usually managed and maintained by either by the software communities or non-profit organization, while traditional software usually maintained by organization that seeking profits from their software sales, which means the third difference between both software is open source software is usually cheap, if not free, while traditional software usually price its software more expensive to generate more profits. And also, as I say before, both software are prone to failing in the future. So for the difference between both software, open source software usually more prone to failing faster than traditional software. Although this weakness is counteracted by how fast communities came out with solution, updates or patch for the software. And for traditional software, while the risk of failing immediately is slim, if there are any problems such as an unknown bugs found in the software, then the update, the patch of the solution to the problem usually come in slower pace than open source software. Okay, so for next difference between the two software, open source software usually have limited intellectual property protection, while traditional software usually have the full amount of intellectual property protection. This meant if someone pirated the traditional software, the developers of the software can sue the people who are pirating the software. For further differences, open source software usually provided the software with full function without any kind of fee, while traditional software usually have trial period or mode where users can only access the basic function, and for the users to access the full functions and features, users need to pay usually quite amount of money to pay for the premium features. And last but not least, with the openness of the open source software, it allows more freedom for the users to experiment and innovate the software based on the user preferences or liking, while traditional software provided less to no freedom at all to users to modify the way the software behaves, since the source code is protected, which creates a lack of innovation of the software. So I believe this is all I can say or talk about the topic, and I hope you all, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy my short talk about this topic, and I hope you all will enjoy this evening with other talks as well. So thank you and goodbye, and see you soon.